The Center for Business Ethics operates at the intersection of scholarship and practice. We develop research-based projects which are intended to have an impact on South African business and society. And one of our major projects, maybe even our flagship project, is the GIBS Ethics Barometer, which was launched in 2019. It's based on a Harvard Business School research tool, which we adapted to address specific South African issues and challenges. And since then, over 30,000 employees from 30 leading South African companies have been surveyed. We've also surveyed other stakeholders, including suppliers, shareholders, and customers. And that data has been used to try to raise the ethical fitness of those organizations. But it was clear to us that the ethics barometer also needed to focus on the SMME sector. And so we were very pleased to partner with E Squared in extending the ethics barometer to the SMME sector. The findings, the key findings of our research were analyzed, and they have been included in a white paper which has just been published, and copies of that white paper are available at the forum. We would like to use those findings to start a conversation about what we've called the ethical ecosystem of the SMME sector, and in particular, the relationship between SMMEs and the large corporations that they supply. Given the crucial role of the SMME sector in entrepreneurship, transformation, and the future of South African business and society, we believe that it's really important to have this conversation. I'd like to invite Malik Fall, the CEO of E Squared, to offer some opening reflections.
I'm delighted to be here. I haven't been in the GIBS arena for a number of years. I used to actually lecture here a few years ago on business strategy. But this is not why we're here today. We are very delighted from an E Squared point of view to have partnered with GIBS on this ethics research or ethics barometer research for small businesses. The issue of ethics and values fares very, very high in the priority of the Allen Gray Group in general. E Squared is an organization that is part of the Allen Gray Group. And for a number of years now, we've been looking to find a way to measure the issue about responsible business and responsible entrepreneurship. We know that there's been a lot of work done around ESG, but we felt that there was a need to go one step beyond and to really try to sort of understand the importance and the impact of the mindset, the attitudes of business leaders, whether it's big business or small business. And this was kind of the beginning in our view, is the beginning of a journey towards sort of understanding this aspect better, and more importantly, finding ways to act on this aspect better to sort of, if it needs to be improved.
Here at GIBS, entrepreneurship is incredibly close to our hearts. And we really are of the opinion that SMEs need to be nurtured in our country. And it's one of the reasons we did this research and research like it, to understand the world from the SME point of view, because SMEs are so critical to the future development of our business environment, but also our social environment. They're really the future of our country. And so it's brilliant that we can start the conversation with such a big bang. One of the findings of our research actually tells us that SMEs feel that they are incredibly poorly treated by the corporates that they try to do business with. They feel like they have been shut out from the market opportunities by corporates. They feel like corporates are incredibly unreasonable in the kind of barriers they put in place to prevent SMEs from doing business with them. And when they do manage to break through, they take ages and ages and ages to be paid. And sometimes that has devastating consequences for the SMEs. And so actually our SMEs feel bullied and intimidated by the very customers that they really want to be doing business with. So I want to firstly ask our representatives of corporates. Now, they look like they're representatives of big business, but I can tell you a secret. Both for Benang and Puti, they have a secret entrepreneurial background. So even though they look corporate, they actually might be on our side after all. But I want to ask Benang, Puti, and I'm going to start with Puti because it is August. Puti, do you think big business would be surprised by these results?
I think certainly what you'll find when you look at all business, you know that every business has started off by being a small business. And so all of us have had to scale to become the big businesses that we are today. When I look at the history of NASPERS, we didn't start off being the largest organization on the JSE. We used to be a much smaller business. And so entrepreneurship is something that is very much a part of our culture within the organization. I think with respect to your question, it perhaps could be a surprise to other corporates, but the reality is that, you know, that is the case. Many small businesses do face difficulties in engaging with big business. On our side, I'm very thankful for the work that was done by Dr. Mohali and through BUSA and BLSA when they started the 30-day campaign. And when they did that, we also participated in that process to ensure that all of our small and medium-sized enterprises would be paid within 30 days. Now, in our case, fortunately, we don't have such a big number of people and infrastructure here in South Africa. However, notwithstanding that, we've made sure that every single small and medium-sized enterprise is paid on time, and we've ensured that we're able to engage with them in a manner that is beneficial to both parties. And I think when you look at the rest of our business, the work that we do within the NASPERS Foundry, for instance, this is our 1.4 billion rand fund that we run, you see that, you know, this is a focused on supporting early stage businesses. So for us, being able to engage with entrepreneurs is such a critical part of our business because we've been there. We weren't always as large as we are today.
Fantastic. Thanks, Puti. Anything you'd like to add, Benang?
I just want to say I agree with my sister. One, because I love her. But I think it must look different for us to break the cycle. And you break the cycle by retaining the core while you stimulate progress. Business should not be surprised by these outcomes, because it is this business that has been cited in the Zondo Commission for having danced with the devil. So when business has aided, abetted state capture, they should be surprised that their suppliers, who are small and medium enterprises, feel excluded, oppressed, subjugated, and marginalized. Because big business in particular, if it doesn't wake up 28 years into democracy, if it doesn't realize that this ANC-led government is incapable of self-correction, that if it is to be, then it is up to us. The study that we did in the last quarter of last year says business is trusted twice as much as government. So what are we going to do as business to come up to this level of trust, hope, and confidence that has been thrust and bestowed upon us, undeservedly so? Business does not need government's permission to address issues of gender equality and pay parity. It needs one CEO at the end of today to go to their human capital department and say, show me a spreadsheet of how we pay women versus men for work of equal value. It should be unacceptable that in the 21st century, We still pay women 75% of what we pay men for work of equal value. Lastly, business does not need government's permission to transform, because this economy must look like us. It must be broadly reflective of the demographics. And these demographics says 51% of 60.1 million South Africans are women, 90% are black, and yet in positions of leadership, 73% is still white male Afrikaners. Until and unless we change it, you see the 2 weeks in July of a failed insurrection, of rampant looting. It's going to happen again and again and again. It is up to us to change it, because no people can be helped by or benefit from institutions that are not a direct result of their own character.
It must be looked at as a collective responsibility of all corporates in South Africa to ensure that they play a part in ensuring that we enter a phase of equal opportunities, but more so ensuring that we anchor SMMEs. Because yes, I think all of us can agree that SMMEs are the heartbeat of all growing economies. Without SMMEs, we'll be recycling again and again and complaining about lack of jobs, lack of opportunities and all that. SMMEs create those jobs. Without SMMEs, we cannot expect companies like Naspers to create jobs for the entire country. We need as many SMMEs as possible so that we ensure that we don't only innovate, but we also create massive scalable jobs.
We have a structural challenge in our economy, and that this concentration of wealth and turnover and other aspects of business sits in the hands of few. Now, how do we change that? And part of this policy, Bonang, is we need to be looking at set-asides in business for SMMEs. I don't think government's ever going to do the 30% set-aside. Let's be very clear about it. But like you said earlier, nothing stops business from being able to do that without government permission. So if we are to fundamentally restructure our economy, we have to address these impediments beyond the ethical stuff. I mean, I can wax lyrically about how we have experienced personally unethical behavior and the bullying that you speak about by big business.
Corporates are not all just big bad people. They do some good for our society, and they make an effort to be sustainable, to protect the environment, to uplift people. The question that I want to ask you is, do you think the SMMEs are doing enough in this respect? We saw in our study that a lot of SMEs think they're doing enough, think that they're surviving, they're creating jobs, however much that job creation is suppressed in our country, they are doing it.
Many of us are doing that. However, we can't run away from the fact that amongst us there are also those that are unethical. You can recall during the pandemic how many businesses were established with the mere purpose of consolidating on tenders, which in my view belonged to existing SMMEs that were already playing that space. And I believe if they were given that opportunity to tender, they would have grown to a phase where they are able to continue to grow their innovative portfolios. But instead, we had overnight companies that came to take over. And those are also regarded as SMEs. Today, where are they? They are all gone. So there's also an element of being unethical in our space. But I think for those that have stood trying times and through thick and thin, and they keep on innovating, they keep on penetrating not only local market, but also international markets. Those are reputable SMEs that I think need to be looked at. At close range and really be supported, because they don't only create jobs, but they create value not only locally, but also contribute to the global IP index, which in our space as a pharma biotech industry, we're really lacking in that regard. And we try so hard to compete with multinationals who are also not ethical. So you can imagine having, unethical behaviors from our ranks, also competing with highly unethical multinationals. It's quite, a burden for us as a local role players.
It is not an easy environment at all for SMMEs. So I think even to start looking at ethics of SMMEs, the reality is that SMMEs will mirror the ethical behavior of big business. To the extent that a small business is engaging with a big business that wants to operate in a certain way, they might find themselves kind of pinched in a certain way, even if it's not in line with their own culture, as is shown in your own study, And so, I think that there is a lot of pressure on SMMEs to be able to scale, to sometimes do things that are unethical in their behavior as a result of the requirements of whatever business it is that they're trying to run after. But I think a lot of support is required for SMMEs. And it's not just funding, it's a number of areas where we need to be able to provide real support.
Ethics is a luxury that SMEs can't afford. But ethics is the essence of how we engage, interact, and interface. Ethics defines our mores, folkways, and culture that we've been talking about. There is nothing more critical in our job as businesses than to create a culture that is conducive for every single solitary one of the businesses to thrive. It is the story of the 4 seeds, the parable of the 4 seeds. That there was nothing mysterious and miraculous about this one seed that fell on fertile ground and it bore fruit in abundance. That our job, especially as big business, is to work on this culture, on this environment, to make it possible for any small business owned by women or men, young people or not so young people, for those businesses to get traction and bear fruit in abundance. But I think let's all accept that 28 years into democracy, South Africa is in a spot of bother. We now hold the world record for all the wrong reasons. The most unequal society in the world. 2010, we took over from Brazil, Gini coefficient 0.63. The highest SME failure rate in the world. The highest youth unemployment rate in the world. The highest femicide rate in the world, not by a factor of 2, but 5 times. It gives you the temperature of the people who sit in our boardrooms and how they behave. Because our grandparents taught us that which you are in the light, you should also be in the dark.
SMMEs, leadership values determine the ethics of the business. Mm-hmm. And I would like to agree with Daniel that, we must extract the letterbox companies out of that SMME layer, because those are not real companies. Let's be very clear about this. I think that we have a far bigger problem as a society. Big business, government, small business, doesn't matter. Pink, white, or blue, doesn't matter. The reality that we face every day in our country are these little ethical dilemmas. Do I pay Coke money or not? Do I pay my e-tolls or not? I don't, by the way. Do I pay my VAT properly? And as a small business, let me tell you something. The questions that I have when I pay my taxes, and I pay my taxes, what happens to those taxes that I pay? And at some point, in the very near future, I'm predicting that we're going to face a major tax revolt in this country. And when that happens, I fear for society.
It's actually economic suicide to try to report any wrongdoing to the authorities. Now, it seems to me that this issue is something that we are all facing, that we all have to grapple with. What can we do to help support SMEs to fight back?
Role players and leaders like yourself and Meputi, I think you need to track whether the policies that you develop as big corporates are actually implemented by the officials, because you have good intentions, all drafted and all good, but on the ground, because we are the one that actually interact with the officials who are at the lower ranks, it seems like there is I don't know whether there is disentanglement between the higher office and lower office in terms of implementing those policies or those guidelines, because officials seem to be going their own route.
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's because of the relationships that they have established with other people outside the scope that you have dictated. Then it becomes like NASPAS is failing in its mandate, not because NASPAS is failing, it's because of those officials. We see that more often in our space where, local procurement, for example, where the government says in public space that we need to prioritize localization. We need to ensure that we support local technologies. And that comes from the president all the way to ministers, DGs, but the officials go sideways. So this is where I'm saying that there is a little bit of misalignment between those that sit in the boardroom and those that execute the mandate.
We have a moral obligation as South Africans first to support the single-man law firms, the doctors, the dentists, the shoe repairer, the barber, etc. I don't have any, so I'm okay. But I think that unless we all accept some responsibility for bringing our country back from the cliff edge, I fear that we will end up over the cliff edge. And so my plea to everybody, individually and collectively, is that we act ethically in the little things and the little dilemmas that we face every day. Because it's only when you start by remedying the little things that the big things start taking care of themselves.
I think I would build on what AJ is saying and really just say that it is incumbent on each and every one of us in all the different areas that we are in. And clearly it's what we are all doing in trying to move South Africa forward. And it cannot be just inherent on the government to do it. We need to see what we can do. And I think that is part of the reason why I'm so happy that we are part of BUSA, which has brought corporate South Africa together to say, let us be focused on solutions for driving South Africa forward. Let us find ways, if we see that there's a problem at Eskom, how can we work with Eskom to make sure that they are able to meet the requirements of the country? If there's a problem in this area, etc. And so let us all be focused on solutions, as we all are, because it's the only way we can create a different future for the children of today.
One thing that we were equipped with as Allen Gray Fellows is that where there's inefficiencies, there are business opportunities. And I think we are endowed with those opportunities as a country as we go through these different layers of crisis. And I think where we need open value chains, I think we need to do that. And big business needs to come to the fore and actually assist in ensuring that we close those value chains. It can't be that we have Ukraine, a small country, that the entire world is waiting for its grain, yet we are endowed with so much. It's actually embarrassing, and I don't want to say any other thing in our field because it's quite embarrassing. even to mention. Even for a mere fact that we rely so much on external vaccines, yet the talent that we have in this country is massive. What are we doing? What are we building towards? What will happen in the next pandemic? You know, what will happen in the next diseases outbreak? Are we all gonna die because we are complacent, because we are used to, you know, getting every solution in the healthcare space from the West? Are we really serious about ourselves?